Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today and happy Friday. Welcome, Amber. How you doing?
I'm doing well and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Yeah, I'm burying the lead here. Are you a big Halloween person?
I am. I love horror movies, love spooky stuff. I usually dress up, but my husband and I are traveling this weekend again.
Oh, yeah, you guys been out and about.
I know.
I actually love Halloween for the opposite reason. I love the costumes, but I'm freaked out and terrified of scary movies. So, that's not my jam.
Well, that's okay. There's something for everyone in Halloween, right?
There is.
All right, Lindsay, as we head into this beautiful Halloween Friday, what is in your lens?
Yes, we have a lot to talk about before we hit the weekend. So former Vice President Kamala Harris recently opened up about a phone call that still lingers in her mind, one that happened right before she hit the stage with President Biden, potential President Donald Trump. Now, she shared this story on the podcast Diary of a CEO, saying that moment helped define her quote-unquote complicated relationship with Joe Biden. That was supposed to be a pep talk from the former president, turned into something else entirely different. Let's take a look.
He went on to talk about a group of people in Pennsylvania who were saying bad things about me because they heard I was saying bad things about him. And when I hung up the phone, it was unbelievable. And I was angry.
Now imagine that. You're about to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump on live television, and your predecessor's biggest concern becomes whether you like him. And that's not exactly the pregame energy you want heading into a political heavyweight match. Now, Harris explained why that call went wrong.
There are only two people in the world other than me that has debated this guy, Hillary Clinton and him. And you know what it's like. It's going into a debate with the stakes being that high and Trump hadn't agreed to another debate. The stakes were so high.
Now, she described that moment as, quote, so unnecessary. And she's right. Timing does matter, especially in politics when every second is an opportunity to either gain ground or lose momentum. The last thing any candidate needs before a national debate is a lecture about gossip in Pennsylvania. Now, this story has come up as Harris is promoting her new book, 107 Days, where she reflects on her short-lived 2024 campaign, her frustrations with Biden, and the lessons she's still processing. She says that she and Biden remain friends. He even called her recently for her birthday, but she admits there were times when he angered her. Harris also hints she might not be done with politics just yet. She's still open to running again, though 2024 clearly left a bitter taste in the mouths of many Democrats. Gary South, a Democratic strategist, told The Hill, the book shows she's, quote, blaming everyone for herself but herself for her loss. In 107 Days, Harris writes, quote, and all of the people in the White House, of all the people in the White House, I was in the worst position to make the case that Biden should drop out. He would see it as naked ambition, perhaps as poisonous disloyalty, even if my only message was, don't let the other guy win. And that right there, that's the tension between loyalty and leadership. It's so much of what defines today's Democratic struggle. Harris isn't wrong for feeling frustrated, but if 2024 taught us anything, it's that frustration does not win elections. Connection does. While I believe Kamala ran a solid campaign with the short time that she did have, I can still critique that she leaned on star power and other things more than she spoke to the average American. Democrats can't afford to keep fighting ghosts of campaigns past. And they certainly can't afford to continue to bring up Biden at every single turn. The future depends on authenticity, not applause. And at the end of the day, blaming Biden won't fix the Democratic message. As I always tell my Republican friends, finger pointing might win arguments, but it does not win votes.
All right.
I felt a little complicated here because you're seeing Karine Jean-Pierre, who's still on her press tour, and then Kamala on her press tour. And at the same time, if there was a solid strategy that came out from this loss and you heard a lot of conversations that have actually moved the needle forward, then I would be like, fine, we can hash out the past as long as you want. But because I haven't heard that very clearly, and the things that I did hear were a little bit out of touch still, as far as like what the plans were, specifically like trying to find their own version of Joe Rogan and things like that, that just seemed a foolish waste of money. And again, spending thousands, if not millions, on the wrong things. I just was frustrated that this is still the point of conversation that she wants to bring up as she's, it sparked couple years, but still that time goes by quickly when you're trying to get back people to be on board with you who know that you just lost an election. I mean, it's not that simple, and we're going to see a tough primary season. So if she really wants to win this, we have to talk about messaging and what the plan is as opposed to Biden.
Yeah, and I think at this point, everyone agrees that Biden was not well at the end of his presidency. I mean, I would argue since he was running for the campaign, but I think most people agree that in those last 2 years that there was a clear decline that was happening. And to watch Kamala Harris and Karine Jean-Pierre on their book tours basically reject that entire premise and say that they still believe that Joe Biden was perfectly capable of serving out a second term seems very out of touch with where American voters' feelings are on that issue. And I know Kamala Harris recently did an interview with an Australian broadcaster where she was asked about whether or not Biden's refusal to drop out of the race and wait so long damaged her ability to win the election, which I think would be an easy answer for her because the title of her book, 107 Days, basically implies that, right? That she didn't have enough time, she thinks, to be able to win. And instead she got really persnickety and angry with the broadcaster who asked her this question and tried to pivot to talk about Trump. And similarly, Karine Jean-Pierre, in an interview when she was asked about Joe Biden, kept saying, well, you keep bringing up Joe Biden, but we're not talking about Joe Biden. And the guy's like, well, that's what your book is about, is serving for Joe Biden. And she responds, and I kid you not, she says, well, that's your experience, but it's not mine. Like, what is going on?
I think what's going to be a struggle is that when we see these other potential presidential Democratic candidates like Newsom and other people that are obviously going to put their names in the hat, the first question when they start primarying and on a debate stage with one another is going to be, should Joe Biden have dropped out sooner? And so the messaging can't be flip-floppy because, as we know, Kamala has gotten hit for flip-flopping in the past, and it's about how she articulates the same message consistently. And so I think if she's just going to flat out say it and start to critique him, it cannot be a slow process. It has to be an explanation to people like me who are at home thinking that we were in a dire circumstance because that's all we were told over and over again, that we cannot have President Trump be president. It'll be the worst of times, right? And I think I'm obviously have enough discernment to say, okay, we wouldn't be the worst of times, and we've had that conversation. But the American people at home were really like, listen, this is going to be as bad as it gets if we allow President Trump to be in office again. So to me, you have to take out the fact of what Biden would have thought of you if you were an egomaniac to tell him, let me run, move to the side. You have to kick down the doors and the wall, tell Joe Biden to move out of the way. If it was that much of an emergency, as we were hearing from every single pretty much, I'm going to go out and say a blanket statement, every single Democratic official in leadership, well, then something should have been done. No one should sit back and allow Jill Biden to make the decision that Biden is cognitively available enough to run. There should have been almost Nancy Pelosi gathering the troops to have like an overthrowing almost of like, Biden, you got to go. We have to win this. And I think the urgency didn't match the action that they were saying. They were vocalizing one urgency, but doing something totally different.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good analysis. And I would also say, just generally speaking, one of the things that I've noticed from both the book that Kamala wrote as well as what she's been saying in her interviews since is there is a lack of accountability. It doesn't really reflect on what she could have done differently in order to get voters to trust her more, to like her more. And, she does blame the short ramp that she had before the election. But at the same time, her approval rating was the highest when she first announced, and then it dropped over time the more that she was campaigning. And so she doesn't seem to grapple with, well, I only had 107 days, but I also used those 107 days pretty poorly and didn't really make the case to the American voters what I was about, how I had changed since 2020 or why I had changed since 2020 when running in the Democratic primary. And so that lack of accountability, the lack of perhaps authenticity is going to cause her to continue to struggle if she runs again in 2028.
Yeah, there's a lot more runway ahead, but I think we're going to have to continue this conversation because it's certainly not done. Coming up, a report from The Atlantic says at least 6 members of the Trump administration are now living in military housing. We'll be right back with reactions to that. According to a new report from The Atlantic, several top Trump officials are now living in military housing in Washington, D.C. and around the surrounding area.
The list includes DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, among others. The report says part of the reason for this development is that many Trump appointees have been met with protesters outside their old homes, and some are fearful of being the target of political violence. The article reads, Trump has survived 2 assassination attempts. Iran has stepped up its efforts to kill federal officials, and political violence, such as the June shooting of 2 Democratic Minnesota lawmakers, the murder of Charlie Kirk in September, and the shooting at a Texas immigration facility 2 weeks later, is a real danger.
Now, The Atlantic has so far counted at least 6 members of Trump's cabinet living on military bases. This practice is something that presidential aides have done throughout history, but it's unusual for so many to be doing it at the same time.
Online, many on the right say the move is justified as a means of officials protecting themselves. Turning Point USA spokesman Andrew Colvett says left-wing violence has grown so bad that now top Trump administration officials have moved into homes on military bases for their own personal safety. It's shocking that this is the reality, yet here we are. And Ben Domenech, editor of The Spectator, sarcastically writes, yeah, how dare these officials not want to be targeted by the same people literally baying for their death and celebrating assassination.
But on the left, some are expressing frustration over this development. Writer Denise Wheeler says, quote, they can now rely on military protection in addition to their personal security, which insulates them from their own actions and encourages them to become even more authoritarian. And Mehdi Hassan writes, quote, imagine if the Dems did this. Oh, forget it. I think this is like an ominous reminder of the polarization, and some of which the Trump administration has contributed to, that society is in. I think after Charlie Kirk's assassination, there's a need to be extra or hyper vigilant about protecting yourself. I think that was a scary moment for the country. But I understand that this has been used both ways, but I think at the same time, it's probably sending a message that the military now protects like one side of the aisle. I understand Trump's administration is the Republican administration that's actually running the country right now, but there are Democratic officials that in the same breath, President Trump has stripped protections from in this year. And so I think that we have to make sure that we protect officials across the board, because it matters to me that everybody doesn't feel like they may be under attack, no matter how many studies you show me about which side, because I can find ones to argue my point that the political violence is the highest on the right, and you can probably find studies that show that it's rising on the left. The point is that elected officials should not be afraid to do their jobs, and I think we've seen President Trump strip some of those protections away, and so at the same time he's giving his team protections. We should just make sure that all leaders feel protected and we don't egg on any of this violence across the board.
Yeah, I mean, on the question of Trump stripping Joe Biden of his security, it was something that was extended without a known reason beyond when he was supposed to receive it as a former president. So that seemed perfectly in line with what is typical of presidents who leave office. But this is an administration that is really facing unprecedented threats. And I would typically say that, you know, I don't want a public official having to live on a military base. I think ideally people should be living in the areas that they're governing. But this is pretty exceptional circumstances. In July of 2025, there was a Rhode Island man who was arrested for making death threats against Stephen Miller, Pam Bondi, and Donald Trump. There were obviously 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump. There was a bounty placed on Kristi Noem's head by a member of the cartel. She has been threatened numerous times after her address was posted online earlier this year. And she actually first moved on to the military base back in August of 2025. And it was described then as a temporary measure to make sure that she was able to be protected. And so I think we're kind of looking at damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation, because if they were living in their private residences and had doubling of security, we'd have obviously a much higher taxpayer bill in order to make sure that those people are protected, whereas putting them on the military base basically ensures that nothing is going to happen, that they are safe, and they don't have to have these massive security teams every time that they're just trying to go to sleep at night.
Right. And this is the thing, I feel a little conflicted about this, because I do think that people should be protected and feel comfortable to do their job. But I also think that we could tone down the language from Trump's administration. But that still doesn't mean that you should be uncomfortable. But I'm looking at what the activist said, and honestly, I can't speak to this because I haven't watched and read every single story that happened outside of Kristi Noem's house. But the activist side is, and this is a group behind the protest called the Arlington Neighbors for United Humanity, are saying basically enough is enough. They're over dramatizing what happened. They're saying they insist their demonstrations are nonviolent. They're saying they're writing chalk messages and running social media campaigns. If there are outside of our house, they're writing chalk messages and protesting, not any physical threats. They're saying they live in a community. They're saying that they're outside of her house saying we live in a community of peace and not that terrorizes children, of migrants and things like that. That's what they're chanting outside. So they're like, why are we inciting violence when we're using our right to protest? I think that's happened in the history of our country where people are around or near people that make the laws and protesting by them so that they hear their message loud and clear, so that they can speak directly to Americans that feel different ways about some of their strategies. So they're saying, their quote actually is, "We are peacefully resisting tyranny. Guns kill people. Chalk scares fascists." And that's what they said. And so they're like, what? Explain how our actions lead to all these officials, specifically Kristi Noem, needing to live on a military base when writing chalk outside of her home and protesting. I think no one has threatened her directly from their group that they're referring to and tying it all together, saying, well, there's people outside, we need to move to a military base.
I think perhaps they're overinflating how involved they are in the decision for these officials to move to a military base. There have been,
They're not that serious, they're not that important.
There have been people arrested for making threats on all of the officials who have moved, credible death threats. So for them to say, well, it's just all because of us, I think is a little narcissistic. But I will say it is kind of interesting to hear them say that, we don't want the Trump administration terrorizing children, but they are outside of Stephen Miller's house where he has multiple children, calling their father a fascist in their chalk messages. What do they think is going to happen? That those kids aren't going to be impacted by that?
Well, I think that there's definitely levels of who do we care about more, right? I want Stephen Miller's kids to feel safe, but I also, when I look at Chicago and see a migrant mother thrown on the ground recently, a video I see with my own eyes from news outlets getting arrested while she's dropping her kid off at school, that's also something that a kid that I would like to protect from not seeing their mother treated that way, especially in that manner when it could easily not be done at the school, and figure out how to, if the message is to deport every single person that's worked here and not committed any crime, not that way. And so I think that there's a humane way to treat people in the same way that if you're going to make that argument, I think that we should extend that to people that are non-criminals in our country that have been contributing to our society. And like I said, there's two schools of thought, that all migrants should be here, and then the other one that migrants actually contribute to the society and have been used by President Trump and his businesses, but also multiple businesses across the country, that farmers use migrants, and that it's deteriorating our economy by getting rid of these people. There's arguments on all ends of the spectrum, but I think humanity is the baseline for each argument, that, or should be, across the board.
Yeah, and I think we should just perhaps consider that in places like Chicago, where they have refused to allow police to cooperate with ICE, that creates the conditions where people are not able to be detained at jails where they would typically be picked up by ICE. And instead, ICE has to actually go into the community and execute these raids and these warrants, which does create these videos of people being picked up at schools, at Home Depots, wherever it is, when this could be a lot easier and you could do it away from the kids if the police were cooperating.
Well, everyone would then have to be in jail for a certain reason, right? These people
Well, it would allow them to
jails.
prioritize the criminal
Criminals.
illegals first, but because they're going into the communities, usually what happens is they're executing a warrant on someone who has a criminal record, and then along the way they encounter other people who are also in the country illegally.
Right. Still ahead, Trump appeared to order the military to resume nuclear testing after 30 years on a, quote, equal basis. Don't go anywhere. President Trump appearing to order the Pentagon Thursday to resume testing of nuclear weapons on a, quote, equal basis via Truth Social post.
Trump made that post just hours before meeting yesterday with President Xi Jinping of China. The post reads, in part, "The United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. This was accomplished including a complete update and renovation of existing weapons during my first term in office. Because of the tremendous destructive power, I hated to do it, but had no choice." Russia is second and China is a distant third, but will be even within 5 years. Because of other countries' testing programs, I have instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately.
Now, according to the AP, Russia actually has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, just over 4,300 compared to the United States' 3,700. The next closest is China with just 600. Now, because the U.S. nuclear stockpile is controlled by the Department of Energy, not the DOD, it's still unclear whether the president meant testing of nuclear-capable weapons or actual nuclear warheads. The military already regularly tests its nuclear-capable weapons, but the last confirmed nuclear test was more than 30 years ago in 1992. And the last known time China tested a nuclear weapon was just 4 years later in 1996, after the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed.
The U.S. reportedly does have the capability to resume testing at a federal site in Nevada, and if it does resume testing, Russia says it will follow suit.
Well, this seemed like a really scary thing. I was really trying to get into the weeds about what the heck was happening. Someone might be misinforming the president about what the other countries are doing, and I think for the sake of clarity here, perhaps he shouldn't go to Truth Social first, because people take that as an official presidential statement at this point, which I think they should, by the way he uses it, because the whole thing kind of sparked confusion for people and kind of raised alarm. It's important to note that the Pentagon did not confirm Trump's statement, and they offered no evidence that nuclear testing was being prepared by our country or by other countries. So that is kind of where we are right now. So I don't know, who do you listen to, the lack of silence from the Pentagon or the statement from President Trump?
I think probably what this was, considering the timing of it happening right before his meeting with Xi Jinping, was more of a verbal warning about the U.S.'s capabilities. This is a peace through strength type of statement, which is warning the rest of the world of what we are able to do if they don't play ball with the United States, if they decide to take up arms against the United States or its allies. So I think this was a reminder that we are not going to be weak on the world stage anymore. We are going to take our duty as the United States seriously. And so if you are going to have a Russia-China alliance that is willing to use nuclear weapons, this is what might happen to you. And so I think it was trying to create leverage going into this meeting with Xi Jinping, which obviously was a really important meeting in terms of the economic trade deals, but there's also a massive security issue with China as well.
Well, I think Trump uses this, calls it the N-word for the nuclear deal,
That's right?
And so, or nuclear conversations. And I think we kind of want to stay away from that because of how fragile things are, specifically with Russia, because they were the first to respond when President Trump said this. So if the target was for China, it felt like Russia took this personally, which they do a lot of things that President Trump says and have a response right away. And nobody in America wants to think that nuclear war is even a potential on the list. Everyone thinks that should be off the table. Now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday, he said Trump's announcement basically that right now the current nuclear risks are already alarmingly high. So he found it inappropriate to kind of even bring that up even as a leverage point with China. And so I think when you take into consideration where we are and how much we would like Russia and Ukraine to end what they have, well, Russia, the attacks that they have going on Ukraine and that war there, I just think that now is not a time when people have actually floated the idea, conspiracy theory or not, that we could easily end up in World War III. I don't think that that's something that we want our president writing on Truth Social, unless he feels like that is a possible next step, that we're testing nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mean, Russia had to respond because that's what they do. They feel like they'll appear weak if they don't say something publicly in response to the U.S. promising or reminding people that it has this capability. But Trump has done a lot to end nuclear proliferation, of course, with the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities, which set them back at least a few years, according to most intelligence assessments, and also making a deal with China to buy American energy to help decouple them from their dependence on Russian energy.
Yeah, so we'll have to watch this closely.
All right, up next, King Charles has stripped Prince Andrew of his remaining royal titles and is kicking him out of his royal residence over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Stick around.
Prince Andrew is no longer Prince Andrew. King Charles III has stripped away Andrew of his royal titles after new revelations about his relationship with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Emails released earlier in October showed that Andrew was in contact with Epstein for longer than most people expected. Charles also evicted the former prince from his royal residence. Buckingham Palace said in a statement, quote, "These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse."
Andrew will now be called Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The late Virginia Roberts Giuffre, whose memoir released last year had made sexual abuse allegations against Andrew that have been brought to light again. Giuffre's brother, Sky Roberts, told BBC in a statement, quote, "Today, an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage."
It should be noted that Andrew has always denied Giuffre's claims. Despite that, however, Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against him, resulting in Andrew paying millions in an out-of-court settlement. Andrew also acknowledged her suffering as a sex trafficking victim. Meanwhile, reactions poured in on X. Political commentator Link Lauren writing, "Prince Andrew just had his title stripped. Meghan and Harry must be next."
Now, Huffington Post and New York Magazine journalist Yashir Ali had a more analytical take. He wrote, quote, "Have to wonder if there's some money involved in this matter from the king's personal funds. After all, now that he's lost everything, what's stopping Andrew from writing a juicy tell-all, selling private correspondence and photos? The thing that's keeping him in line since the Queen died has been Royal Lodge and his titles."
That's an interesting point from Yashar. I hadn't considered that, and I wonder if there was some kind of backroom deal.
Because he seems like
right?
the type to write a tell-all.
Yeah, he's messy.
Yeah, he's very, obviously, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the historical significance, well, first of all, I think this is about time that they did something. I think that sweeping under the rug of this whole thing and the protecting of royals, there has to be a limitation to that, right? And when you see that he's paid out the survivor in millions, I know that settling a case doesn't mean that you're guilty, but the fact that there was so much smoke, I mean, every time some new story came out, like the relationship between him and Epstein lingered longer than anyone that we're even talking about in the U.S. so far. But it's almost unprecedented for a British royal to be stripped of their title. I think the last comparable one, I looked it up, was in 1919, Prince Ernest Augustus, and he lost his title for supporting Germany in World War I, which is wild. So you see how egregious, it has to be. And so I think, after years of this back and forth, we're going to have to see how else people handle this. I think, and not tying it to President Trump, not tying it to Bill Clinton, looking at how it affects us here in the U.S. If there are people that had lasting relationships and money trails that the Treasury Department can find with people that we revere or look at or have unlimited power because of their business practices in our society right now, they should be held accountable when it comes down to Epstein. And I think that even though it took way too long, probably for all survivors, the fact that we're not allowing somebody to sit on a pedestal, or Britain is not allowing somebody to sit on a pedestal that behaved in this manner, is something that I think is an admirable step forward, and America should follow suit.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of surprised actually that they finally followed through, because his name has been all over Epstein-related content for a long time. And this being the final straw is kind of interesting. Obviously, Virginia Giuffre passed away this year, and this memoir was released after she died. And so she doesn't even really get to see, at least, justice while she was alive. And so that's obviously very difficult, and it's just a little, I think that it should have been done sooner.
There's also this stain on the UK, and I'm saying this because we recently did a docuseries there, and I think as Americans, and I can only speak to our experiences, that you go there and it has this almost whimsical feel, right? They have something that we don't have. They have royalty and a lot of things that we don't subscribe to, but there's a fascination. You can look at the sheer numbers of how many people around the world watch the royal wedding and how much people are fascinated globally with the royal family. So to see them attached to something this egregious, even when our president goes to visit and is met with all the statesmanship and all the decor and everything, there's huge demonstrations about Epstein and the royal attachment to Epstein, specifically with the prince. So it's kind of like, so it's Prince Andrew. So to see that they can remove that stain from themselves and every single thing they do won't be now protesters calling them to task on this. I think that the king was facing like mounted pressure. I'm not sure why now was the time, but the pressure kept going. And obviously no matter what state leader came to visit or what was happening, you're seeing protests over there. So it's almost like the royal family, although they're not scandal free, probably thought this was overwhelming and too much. And seeing that it's even escalating here in the US is probably a sign that, like, listen, the most fire and smoke we've seen has been on the end of Prince Andrew. And so you guys need to call to account what happened or what didn't happen and be clear about where you stand. Because if there's any confusion, people will attach the entire royal family to sex trafficking, and that will continue to be a comparison that circles around endlessly and puts a stain on that family.
I wonder if this is a new direction for the royal family, because historically, with this 1919 exception, typically what happens when they're facing scandal is they close ranks and they cover up, right?
Right.
They try to protect the members of the family from anything that could be damaging from a PR perspective. But they're also very loyal, right? They don't throw each other under the bus. They try to plant things in the media, manipulate to try to prevent any of them from looking bad for any extended period of time. In this case, perhaps Prince Andrew's transgressions were just too severe for them to keep ignoring. But I also wonder, maybe this is a more modern approach to the royal family where things are going to have to be a little more tightened up, and we're not just going to go out of our way to protect people who are involved in misbehavior.
And I think that's a welcome change if that is the case, because we're in a society where you can't really withhold information from people anymore. The amount of access, even though I have plenty of criticisms about social media and misinformation, the amount of access you have to actual factual information or perspectives on what possibly could be happening is fascinating. And so when you talk about back in the day, let's say you watch shows like The Crown, which are obviously an exaggerated account of what happens with the royal family, but when you're acknowledging that they would give stories to the Daily Mail or work closely with tabloids for the look that they wanted to, or give them one scandal in order to turn away from a bigger scandal, that worked back in the day when that was the main source of information for people in the UK or even in the US. But now we have endless people that have either worked and left working with British royals, or write and have studied British royals for years. People who are doing their own podcasts, people in the US who are looking at historical information plus what's happening now and coming to the best conclusions. So when you have this much information and this many people speaking about topics now, you can't pretend in the same way that they used to. And so if that is the change, this is a modern and welcome change because it's going with the times. We can't be fooled by a headline anymore because that's not the only place we get information from.
Yeah, I mean, with independent media rising and you don't have just a few outlets controlling the conversation and the narrative, it's a lot harder to get all of these people in your sort of favor trading camp or on your payroll to do your PR work for you. You can't silence everybody because there's now millions of people who have access to social media and who are able to have their own investigatory, I guess, ways of going about looking at the royal family. So yeah, they definitely can't keep things locked up the way that they used to.
And there are so many people that look at the royal family. I'm not sure in the UK. I have a few friends from the UK that are like, don't come at our royal family, right? Like, this is protection. But then I know from a US perspective, we criticize, like, wait, why are they getting taxpayer dollars? What's happening? So I think they're also dealing with the mounting idea that a lot of people have maybe opened their eyes to the fact that, well, I guess maybe, but I think when you talk about history and
yeah, I like the tradition
like
of it. I mean, I think that they do a lot of public service. It's lovely. Obviously, it wouldn't work in America
at all.
But it's nice to watch.
No kings protest.
Yeah, no kings. It's nice to watch from afar, though.
Yes, it is. The pomp and circumstance of it all is very fun.
I'm a big fan of tradition, so I do enjoy it. More big changes right here at home. They might be coming to CBS in the wake of Bari Weiss's appointment to editor-in-chief. Stay with us.
Big change reportedly coming to CBS, according to a report from Variety. Gayle King, host of CBS Mornings, may be leaving the show. King joined the network's morning programming back in 2011, when it was still called CBS This Morning, and stayed on as the main anchor of CBS Mornings when it was rebranded back in 2021. Her contract with the network is set to expire in May, and sources tell Variety she may step down from the show, though, according to a report by the New York Post, quote, a source familiar with the situation noted that nothing is set in stone and King hasn't yet made plans regarding her career after that point.
The Post reports an insider told them that King has very different politics from the new editor-in-chief, Bari Weiss, who has appeared to undertake an overhaul of the CBS News division since she started at the beginning of the month. Under Weiss, the network has reportedly made extensive budget cuts, canceled 2 streaming shows, and made around 100 layoffs, including at least 8 on-air correspondents and hosts. CBS Evening News co-anchor John Dickerson has also announced he would leave the network earlier this week.
As for King, Variety magazine reports that it is still possible that she remains with the broadcaster to produce her own program. CBS indicated that they would like to keep her at the network, with a spokesperson telling Variety, quote, she's a truly valued part of CBS and we look forward to engaging with her about the future.
So there was a statement from a spokesperson who said that no decisions have been made regarding what Gayle King was going to do regarding the end of her contract in May 2026, and that there haven't even been official conversations about it. So if she is leaving, it could be that it's on her own accord. Maybe she just doesn't like the future of CBS under Bari Weiss and she doesn't want to be involved anymore, or maybe she's angling for some kind of new program. Who knows? But obviously there has been a lot of change at CBS since Bari Weiss took over, cutting a lot of positions. Earlier this week, there was a report where insiders at CBS described some of the layoffs as a quote-unquote bloodbath. Coincidentally, also what Trump said about the auto industry ahead of the election, of what would happen if Kamala Harris won the election. But also getting rid of, apparently they had like a diversity reporter department. She got rid of that. And then John Dickerson leaving as well, who was someone who tried not to burst into tears after Trump was reelected when he appeared on a late night show. So probably not too much of a anything to cry about for most people, him leaving the network. But look, CBS's ratings have been declining for years. People have really low trust in media right now. I think to continue on the same trajectory would be insane. Bari Weiss, I think, is trying to really shake things up to make this a more competitive news outlet. And people aren't going to agree with every move that she makes, but would like to give her some latitude to try to get this back to a place where people can watch CBS and feel like they're watching something that is a little more objective and unbiased and actually presents both sides of the political aisle.
Yeah, I think, well, we know that Bari Weiss is frustrated from several reports about how many people are leaking news exactly as it happens. So when you say that Gayle King has not made any final decisions, that's it seems like an accurate thing because it's abruptly happening and abruptly in the news. It almost seems like the same day, the same way we know who they're auditioning or interviewing or who they're reaching out to. And Brett Baer had to come out and say, hey, wait a second. I think it's important to note about Gayle King's significance at CBS. I mean, the network wasn't doing well, and I was at NBC at the time. It was behind NBC and ABC when they brought her on to CBS to kind of revamp the morning show. And she was a central figure in that entire movement. And what I think that she did to the program is bring ratings dramatically up. And she really did help them change and make the new iteration of that morning show and actually get people to actually watch it. Because Good Morning America and Today Show have always been the big two in the game. And CBS This Morning was a distant third. Mm-hmm. So what Gayle King did is bring them up to par with those just to even be recognized, where people are constantly pulling from those. They're becoming viral moments. It's a big deal. What I also know is that when Charlie Rose left after the entire Me Too scandal, that brought the ratings back down for them. So it was an unfortunate event for everybody, but that wasn't any part of Gayle King. She came in and did her job and also did a hard work for the network and had some major interviews that have sat in the ethos of what we discussed for decades, including that first and exclusive interview with R. Kelly and just many people that really showed you what a type of journalist she is. She's using her connections and closeness to proximity of celebrities, but also when she calls them the task and asks questions, she asks tough ones, and it doesn't matter how you think she should know them, what her relationship should be, she's still grilling people and doing the job of a journalist. So I think, it's tough to watch this woman be rewarded in this way, who did so much for the last decade or more for CBS to kind of bring it back. It wasn't surely her fault that the ratings were falling. They did a lot on the show, brought in a lot of new hosts in the morning. And so if this is the case and the report that Variety is putting out is true, I hope it's to really do something that she likes. I don't think that she necessarily has to stay on CBS This Mornings, right? But I hope that they would really make space for her and that the statement coming out of CBS would be to make it even more firm that, yes, of course we want her to stay. If she doesn't want to stay, that would be wholly on her. And I've seen networks make statements like that for other people that were deciding to leave, or the decision was wholly their own because they adore and love them so much, and they repay them for all they've done to bring up the network and all they've given. Because Gayle King has a lot of jobs, right? She doesn't have to work there. She's the head of Oprah Magazine, of I think content there. She also has a serious radio show. So it's not that I feel bad that she's going to have some suffering in any way. She's an esteemed journalist who probably can get multiple jobs. But I think just CBS paying her back in this way it's unfortunate to me. I also know that even though a lot of people get laid off, Gayle King is one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name over there at the network. And a lot of times, from my perspective and purview in this industry, when there are massive layoffs or big changes, Black women are at the forefront of that before looking at the rest of the country. The rest of the company. So when we talk about NBC, we saw Ann Curry be let go. And she was an esteemed journalist who gave like 20 plus years of her career to NBC, and they kind of pulled the rug and didn't give her her a proper goodbye from my purview. We saw Tamron Hall get replaced also at NBC and then go on to beat the odds and start her own talk show. But still, the way she left, it was very obvious was not ideal for her, even though she gave more than a decade or 2 decades to the network, from local news to big things. We saw Joy Reid, the same thing, kind of like the rating, they're saying the ratings were way down, but she still got the rug pulled. Even the show right after her, Rachel Maddow, was like, I don't understand why we started with Joy Reid. Like, we can go down the ratings list of all the different people we could have started with that maybe the ratings were lower, but they just started with Joy Reid. And so my point there is that we don't always have to start with the Black woman. She was doing a great job, and we need to make sure that we're honoring people that have given so much to the network. Like Joy Reid has done a lot for NBC, from working with the Griot to the Weekend Show to Down, and then you start with her like, oh, let's pull the plug right here. Let's start here to make cuts.
Well, she was also toxic for the brand. We'll disagree on that. Look, we still don't know who is initiating these conversations about Gayle King, right? Like, she could have gone to them and said, I'm planning on leaving at the end of my contract, and they don't want that to be public yet, so why would they put out a statement begging her to stay if she's already informed them of her intentions to leave, right? Like, we don't know the direction that this is going right now, so I don't want to speculate too much on, reading into CBS's statement or the things that have been leaked to the press until we know more about exactly how those conversations have gone. CBS also is apparently trying to poach Scott Jennings from CNN.
I saw that, yeah.
Which would be actually brilliant, because he has single-handedly, I think, lifted the ratings of their primetime shows by doing that roundtable panel with Abby Phillips, right? Like, he is one of the most aggressive conservative voices on any mainstream media news show besides Fox News, and it has caused people to tune in because they get to see like real substantive debates happening on a nightly basis, when previously you would see a CNN panel that had 10 people on it and there was one Republican, but it was like a Republican who hated Trump or had left the party, right? Like, it wasn't a real conservative voice. So poaching him would be brilliant. Also, if they bring back Catherine Herridge and give her a show, I think that would be amazing.
I hear and respect that. I think Scott Jennings does a great job holding his own at the table. I think it's important to hear wide-ranging voices, and I like what CNN has done with Abby Phillips. I just really want to reiterate that when somebody has given that much to a brand to help it grow to the place that it is, even though it's having a dip or a low moment, they shouldn't be the first person where you start with the axe. And while I welcome new voices, I think we've got to look around the whole company. And you're right, she's not the only person that got let go. It's possible there are a lot of other people, but she is the flagship person, in the same way that Robin Roberts is the face of Good Morning America, is the same way that she is. And I just think they need to make sure that they treat her the same way she's treated the company by staying for 12 years.
Well, she'll be there at least till her contract runs out in the spring, so we'll see what happens.
Americans will be setting their clocks back, oh no, an hour this weekend. And not everyone, including me, is happy about it. Coming up, why lawmakers continue to toy with the idea of making daylight saving time permanent.
It's that time of the year again. We're about to turn the clocks back for daylight savings. But a bill to end the practice of changing the clocks twice a year, known as the Sunshine Protection Act, was taken up in the Senate earlier this week. It would make daylight saving time permanent in the United States year-round. But unfortunately, the legislation was not able to reach a consensus in the Senate.
Now, while supporters of the bill say ending clock changes could reduce inconvenience and provide economic and health benefits, opponents worry it could lead to darker winter mornings that could pose safety issues. Daylight saving began in the United States in the 20th century as a wartime effort to save energy. But over 100 years later, 47% of the American public opposes the current clock changing system, according to an AP NORC poll from earlier this month. Instead, 56% of people said they prefer to have daylight saving time year-round with less light in the morning and more in the evening. And 42% support standard time year-round with more light in the mornings and less in the evenings.
I'm a little split on this because...
on like the whole idea, or splitting the time, or which one, like morning or evening?
I'm split on the idea of doing permanent daylight savings time, because the dark mornings make it really difficult to get out of bed. But I also hate the dark. I just don't like winter is the problem. Like, it has nothing to do with the time. The dark mornings suck. The dark evenings suck when you're getting home from work and you're just driving in the dark. Like, it's miserable. The whole thing is miserable. It should just be summer all the time. I clearly need to move to the South.
Or LA.
Oh, God.
You're like, no, I can't even imagine you in LA.
I'm good over there.
You and Newsom hanging out, having a drink.
East Coaster through and through.
Well, I lived in Arizona. I had the luxury of living in the place where they don't do daylight saving time, and it was lovely.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it. Okay, I was a reporter there. It was dark in the morning. Fine, it was a little dark in the morning. Now, I'll say I've also lived in New York where I had to be on the train at 4 o'clock in the morning for a really early shift, and that sucked. Not that the sun would ever be out at that time, but I'd like to see it at least while I was prancing in the office when I got there finally around 5:36. To not see it until 6:30, that might disturb those early morning people. So I don't want to get in the middle of that beef. I just think, can we just pick something? Like, I don't want to think about the idea of losing sleep this Sunday. I don't want to, that is stressing me out as somebody who's the mom of a 4-year-old.
Oh, you're going to gain an hour.
Oh, gain an hour.
Yeah,
so I guess the other one, the back.
It's the spring forward.
Yeah, I hate the idea of
spring forward sucks.
And then also, iPhones like readjust for you or do it naturally. But you remember back in the day, and I still feel like sometimes I'm scared my iPhone won't. So I have like anxiety, and this is a real thing that my phone didn't do the thing.
Yes.
Because technology can fail us. We know that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, just super on edge that usually that night, either way, going back or forward. And
yeah,
so
you don't end up sleeping any better with the extra hours.
It's a lie.
You're all tense. And then you have to go around your house and you got to change the stove, the microwave, all of your, analog clocks that run on batteries.
It's annoying.
And in your watch.
The one time that I actually enjoyed it a lot was I was at the club and it was 1 o'clock in the morning twice.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got an extra hour party. And now this was back when I did live in LA. So I was having a good time.
I will.
But that was,
I've been in that
you've been in a party and you're like, oh my God, it's 2 a.m. again.
We're still going, guys.
And you can get some extra sleep. That's the one time that I actually appreciated it. But I will say that you gotta I think we should just settle on something. I didn't realize that it was this contentious about if people wanted more light in the morning or night. So if that's the biggest beef, then I guess we can't figure it out. Maybe we should really, with the census in the next couple of years, ask people which one they prefer. And if we get an overwhelming answer, like I'd like nights to be longer, just put it as a question on the census.
Yeah.
And if we get an overwhelming answer, can we please just do it? Because this bill is like wasting time and money, continuously talking about it for it to go nowhere.
What do you think about the argument that some of the senators made about it being dangerous for it to be dark throughout the morning? I guess because people are driving to work. I mean, that seems a little speculous to me, but... Well,
I know that Robbie always has an argument about how old the people are that are running our country, saying stuff like this. This sounds like, and no disrespect to the grandmas out there, this sounds like something that my grandma would say, oh, it's too dark. Like, guess what? We have to go to work dark or light. If we have a night shift, people have to work in the dark. So it's like, forget. Is it kind of, they said it's, okay, my producers are telling us that it's mainly about kids going to school in the morning and it being dark.
I feel like it was dark all the time when I was going to school in the morning. They should just start school later.
Well, that's a lot. Start school later?
Yeah, we start.
Then you're jumping into parents' schedules and work schedules. Parents got to get to work.
I mean, I rode the bus and I started at 7:30 when I was in high school. It was crazy.
Yeah, they are, and they moved my niece's schedule up to 7 a.m. They said if you're going to catch the bus, you got to be there by 7.
This is the real debate, Lindsey. Kids need more sleep, right? The natural circadian rhythm of a child is go to bed later and wake up later. And instead we have kids getting up at 6 a.m. to go to school. No wonder we can't read anymore.
I'm actually having a heart attack thinking about the idea that my daughter starts kindergarten next year and has a hard income.
Oh my gosh. All right.
That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content from us. And those of you who like to listen on the go, you can listen to our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll see you next week.